Good morning, all. It is definitely a great day to be alive. I have some esteemed colleagues here with me today. We're going to kind of take this road a little bit. Our conversation is the color of masculinity. How are our cultural education of manhood both hinder and helps us? So I want to make sure I kind of set the stage a little bit. We're going to talk about cultural education. We're going to talk about manhood, and we're going to talk about some things that, we can not only talk about, that we're going to have conversations with, but also kind of build in some solutions on. Here are some things that we can do to help our community and beyond. So I am Shannon Reed. I'm the Director of Innovative Strategies for Boys and Men of Color at United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. So how I want to set the stage, and I'm going to definitely let our esteemed colleagues on the call today have kind of take over the conversation. All I want to do is be the roadmap and navigate through the process. So I will kind of start here. So when we talk about cultural education consists of the capacity for reflection. So we're going to do a lot of that today around reflecting on what cultural education is. So when we talk about, and the work I do specifically around Black and brown boys, that is, cultural education is to learn to reflect upon what it is, cultures of others and culture in general. And so as I started thinking about what this topic would be, I wanted to make sure that there were some basic things, right? Just for us to talk about the basics. And so I looked up what manhood was, and it was very short and simple. What the version of manhood is, and it is the condition of being human. So think about that, manhood, the condition of being a human being. And when I think about all the things that that's plaguing our country right now, and I want to make sure that we do take a moment, if we could just take a quick moment of silence for all the lives that have been slain in the last year and prior, just a moment of silence. Thank you all for that. And so as we think about all of these things that are really occurring in our community, the question is, how are our cultural education of manhood both hinders and helps us? Dr. Ramon, I'll start with you. And as I start with you, one of the questions that is plaguing right now is, I want you to introduce yourself, give us a quick introduction, snapshot, elevator version, whatever that may be. And I want you to talk about the cultural expressions of masculinity that you grew up around. And what do you see now as toxic? And what do you see as a lesson to share? And I'll help you through that just in case you get lost as you talk about that conversation. So Dr. Ramon, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for that introduction. My name is Ramon Ortiz, Dr. Ramon Ortiz. I have obviously a PhD. So, I mean, that's something that I've been able to accomplish. But I think my sense of identity doesn't come from my academic training. I think it's just a tool of how I make my living and how I analyze problems. My cultural identity comes from a deep understanding of my history, right? And I may have notions of masculinity that maybe in modern times seem a little offensive, and I apologize if that comes out. I'm not trying to offend nobody, but at the same time, I will not apologize for having a crystallized sense of ethnic identity. I think that's part of the issue today. My family, both my maternal and paternal side, because in Spanish, in my culture, my Latino culture, mainly Mexican American, we recognize both sides of our lineage, right? In a traditional Hispanic culture, traditional Latino culture, you will always have two names, the name of your mother and the name of your father, because you recognize both the maternal and the paternal lines, right? So in a traditional sense, my name would really be Ramon Rogelio Ortiz y Villarreal, which is my mother's name. You would have both names, right? So I come from that tradition, and I've had the ability of sort of seeing masculinity through my growing up, right? My father is an architect of that type of masculinity, one positive side. And then my uncles who, been in and out of jail and so forth are kind of the other side, right? Not that they're bad people, but I'll start. I think masculinity and you have to sort of deconstruct it, look at what it is. And I think there's certain traits that are universal across cultures, whether that's as a Mexican or African Americans. There's three primary things that sort of define masculinity across all groups and manifest in some way or another. The ability to provide, the ability to protect, and procreation. Those are the three things that sort of manifest differently. In many respects, the things that are defined as toxic masculinity, and I don't use that term, but since you brought it up, I will speak to that, is in many sense a degradation or a perversion of those ideals manifested in negative ways, right? In my culture, Mexican culture, we're very clear. There's a thing called hombría, manhood, right? And there's a certain code of conduct that comes with that your family instills in you. And then there's machismo, and to give you an idea, the hombría is like my father who will work, 2 or 3 jobs, sacrifice for his family. That is hombría, right? The man who will put everybody in his home will eat before he does because, if there's no food, he'll go hungry and still go to work. That's hombría, the idea of discipline and sacrifice. Machista is the guy who gets drunk and shows up and slaps his wife around, bullies kids, has kids all over the place, don't take care of them. That's a machista. So in my culture, there's a very clear distinction. So how I grew up, I had the privilege of being a part of a very traditional culture. Both my parents are together. My notion of manhood came from my father. And, I seen him at one point, he was a construction worker and he was injured and he was basically paralyzed for 1.5 years. And he struggled to teach himself to walk. I remember seeing him in the house. My mother had to go to work in a factory to support us. Eventually, my father ended up taking a settlement because our family was hard up for money. We were basically struggling really bad. And he took that money and nobody would hire him. He started a business. So from the age of about 10 to my early 20s, I didn't play sports in the summer. I literally went to work with my father. By the time I was 13, I was doing the work of a grown man on a construction site with my father. So my idea of masculinity sort of came from that. And I think that as I reflect on it, I find myself privileged because I was never lost in the sense of trying to understand what a man is and so forth. So I think that is a very important thing. A lot of spaces like that don't exist, right? Most kids don't go to work with their father in a very, quasi hyper masculine environment, which is a construction site. You're not going to find one more hyper masculine than that. And understand a balanced approach to masculinity. And I think when we talk about that, what is masculinity? I go back to sacrifice and discipline, in every way that, that tends to manifest itself. I think one of the things that we've done as a society, we place such an emphasis on money and education, that we forget that really the central origins of your being is your family. That should be your identity. Your loyalty should always be to your primary, to your immediate family, and then your extended family, and then your community, and then your country. That's the degree of loyalty. And that has a socializing effect on you. And another thing that's very interesting about Latino culture is when you talk about cultural education, we also make a distinction in the purest sense between what's called preparation and education. I mean, I'm translating directly, but there's actually a difference. My family educated me. Mi familia me educó. Tu familia te educa, right? Your family educates you. That's your social graces, your norms. How do you interact with people? How do you treat women? How do you treat children? How do you treat the neighbor? How do you respect people? That's education, social education, social grace. What you get from school is preparación, preparation. That is academic preparation, right? My PhD is I've been trained. My academic training as a researcher. My MBA is my academic training as an administrator, right? So there's a very clear distinction, and I think those points are very good points of reflection. Now, I recognize that not everybody had that upbringing, even within my community. But many times I think that's very important to have a very clear sense of what is masculine. At the same time, what are masculine values? Obviously, the archetype being strong, being this and that, and I get that. Vulnerability, I sort of question vulnerability. You don't want to teach men to be vulnerable.
We're going to get into that.
What you want them to do, you want them to be human, right? Compassion, and those are all values that can be reflected in a masculine way as well. So that's sort of my worldview. That's how I come upon, across things, and it sort of informs like how I interact with people. Again, I don't denigrate anybody. I think men, especially young men of color, need to be provided opportunities for upward economic social mobility, because again, that gets to the ability to provide for a family. I mean, that's extremely important. That's sort of where I would go with this. I'm not a cultural anthropologist. I'm not a researcher in that area. Yeah. A man who grew up and reflected on my masculinity at an earlier time in life.
So, Dr. Ortiz, I think you gave us a really great roadmap. I'm going to bring in my good brother Ajamu, into the conversation. And one of the things that I'm reflecting on, even Dr. Ortiz, what you just spoke about, I heard it succinctly, right? Protect, provide, sacrifice, discipline. The same question to you, brother Ajamu, and please introduce yourself once again. Talk about the cultural expressions of masculinity that you grew up around. What do you see now as toxic, and what do you see as a lesson to share?
Absolutely. What's going on, family? I am Ajamu Butler, founder of Heal the Hood Milwaukee. You can see the logo in the background. Real proud of you. I'm 29 years old. I have a very unique perspective on the game because I come from the ghettos. I come from the slums. And that's something I'm proud of. I'm not proud of the state of the hood, you understand? But I am proud of the adversity that I've seen. I'm proud of the poverty that beat me up and shaped me and molded me into the man, the father, the activist, the child of God, the lecturer, the teacher that I am today. So it truly is a privilege, man. And those who know my story, it's a privilege to sit in these particular circles, because unlike Dr. Ortiz, I don't have any, academic background to push me forward. It's literally just muscle and whatnot. It's literally just grace that has brought me thus far. When you talk about that picture of masculinity, like, I don't know if y'all saw me in the background. I was over here snapping and clapping for the doctor because he was teaching. And I can reflect some of those same things. Even though we grew up in the ghettos of Milwaukee, my family always grew up with a very African-centered influence. And because of that, I was trained and groomed and raised a certain way. My name itself, Ajamu Butler, means one who fights for what he wants. Mm-hmm. And so in my household, every time your name is spoken, we speak life and light unto you. So I was blessed to have a lot of extremely positive male influences in my life. And don't get me wrong, growing up in the ghettos, just as a Black boy, curiosity, took me to the streets. I ain't have to start gang banging. I wasn't raised around that as a definition of manhood. I ain't have to start selling drugs. I wasn't raised around that as a definition of manhood. I chose to jump off the porch, just being a Black boy in the ghettos. But one thing that I do value about the men in my particular circle, the elder men who raised and groomed me, that were huge on family. If you don't have family, you don't have anything. You can have $1 billion in your bank account, but if your wife don't respect you, if your children don't love you, if you got a strange relationship with your mom and your dad, you understand, if your community family ain't really rocking with you and supporting you, what is that $1 billion really worth? Now, I ain't got $1 billion, so I'm not just going to sit here and, you understand, I'm just saying, though, we value certain things. When I was about 13, I did my first Manhood Camp. Right, we did a Manhood Camp, and it's where some of the elders in my particular community, they took a bunch of us young teenagers out, a couple hours up north. And I promise you, I'll never forget this, because I probably was the youngest cat there, and it was just a hell of an experience. So we went up north camping. The first day was, we kicked it, we hung out, we got to kind of do our thing as young men. But they told us, y'all got to go to sleep early because we're going to have a very early morning. Woke us up about 5 a.m. We had to jog to this huge field, man. We had to climb the fence. We had to do some laps. We had to climb back over the fence, then go on a walk through these, through the woods and whatnot. The most valuable thing about that, to kind of, I don't want to say wrap up my commentary, but to make it plain and make it stick. The most valuable thing about that particular camping trip was they had us go down this hill, right? It was this steep, muddy hill, extremely muddy hill. And I'm talking about, I ain't no telling how many feet tall this hill was, but this was not an easy feat. But we had to go down it, and then as a team, we had to come back up. And it was so interesting because we was out there for a couple hours because, I mean, it was a difficult task and there was no help from the OGs. They was like, y'all if you got to step on your brother's shoulder and you got to carry the weak man, okay? And then you got to grab a branch and you got to make a rope out of the vine and the twine on your shoestrings and, make a harness to carry somebody. Figure that thing out, young kings. And what that taught me, family, on this call and those tuning in, it taught me the value of brotherhood. A man is only as strong as the brothers who stand beside him. So I, as a father, that's one thing I'm wholesome in. That's one thing I believe wholly in. I, as a father, all my brothers is fathers. Okay. And if they ain't taking care of the kids, then it's up to me as a man to tell them, say, listen, bro, that ain't the energy I'm on out here. I ain't trying to tell nobody how to run their life. But like I said prior to, family is huge for me. And fatherhood is a divine gift to me. And I take that role serious as a dad and as a father. And so, like I said, brotherhood, familyhood, providing, and not just your basic provision. We talking about providing peace of mind. I think a lot of time men think that providing is solely about that cash. No, what about emotional security? Can we provide that? Can we provide a household where our kids can come up to us and say, Dad, I had a rough day at school. I'm being bullied, or maybe come up to us for relationship advice. It was a little awkward for me talking to my dad about girls and sex and stuff, but I did because my dad created that sense of emotional security. And so for me, the idea of toxic masculinity, and I don't like to use the term either, but for me, it's everything opposite of a righteous man. It's everything opposite of somebody who is loyal, dedicated, who believes in something bigger than themselves, right? Who is a sacrificer, who is a provider, a protector, who is grounded in some sort of spiritual foundation. I'm not talking about religion or anything. And I'm not even saying that because we do have family who don't believe in the spiritual foundation. But they have faith.
That's right.
Faith is not caught in a title or a deity or a name of a God. Faith is just something that says, I can't push through no matter what the world presents to me. So, I don't want to take up too long, but again, those are values I hold sacred, man. Family and holding the family down through a system of protection, providing, and spiritual foundation.
Man, Brother Ajamu, that's that right there, man. That's so powerful. And I just need you to know we're going to touch on that piece. We're going to go back. We're going to come back to that piece because we need to have a conversation about that, specifically around what's happening in our community and what we're seeing as Black and brown men today, and what we are enduring right now. And so I want to make sure we come back to that. I want to bring Brother Michael into the conversation. Once again, introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and once again, talk about the cultural expressions, masculinity that you grew up around. What do you see now as toxic, and what do you see as a lesson to share?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Reed, for having me here today. My name is Mike Hernandez, and I work here in Madison in the Madison Metropolitan School District. I've been an educator for 26 years, 7 as a teacher, 12 as a principal, and then the last few as a chief of secondary schools. Dr. Ortiz talked about his childhood and growing up, and it was very similar. I mean, he took the words. I wrote some notes down, and I was like, yep. I owe everything that I am as a man right now to what I learned to do or not to do from my father, right? Understanding on how I felt, making same mistakes. I will 1,000% say that I learned my work ethic from my father and my mother. And my mom was just as much as the head of the household. Both we worked in a field. We picked tomatoes and cabbage and jalapenos, and we loaded them. And my father drove the semi. And when we went to school, we never saw him. We never saw him at any of our games or any of those events. My mom would always show up. She would always show, but I never saw. And it was one in which he made sure we were provided for. We had a meal. We never missed a breakfast. We never missed a dinner. And that was something that my friends would always notice, is that we were extremely tight on that end. The work ethic is what I learned, but the absentee part is what I became resentful of, because I would see people have, their parents at different events. I have 3 children. My wife and I have 3 children. I have an 18-year-old Isabella, my son Diego turned 17 today, and my youngest is 14, Cruz. I saw when I started my jobs, I became a principal and I started putting in the 12 or 14-hour days every day because I wanted to make sure that we were comfortable and provided for. I missed a ton of stuff. And when my kids got older, they spoke about this, and I knew I had to make a change because I fell in the same routine as my father. Because I wanted to provide, I wanted everybody to have what they could or wanted. I will say spoil. I will say that because we didn't have a lot back in the day. But I did this. I tell you what, I was a principal at East High School. I loved working in that building. I left the perfect job because of a conversation my daughter had on the side at the dinner table. I was offered this job that I have, and I turned it down. And we were sitting at the dinner table, and it was middle of June. And I was talking to my wife about it, and I was like, I still want to work with students. I still want to I feel that energy. And Bella, who is one of the sweetest young ladies that you're ever going to meet and is so flexible, and all the kids have known as me being a principal, and she says, hey, Dad, if you took that job, would you have dinner with us more than once or twice a week?
Wow.
I called and I took the job.
Wow. And I'm sure that, that question, right? That question alone puts you in a position where it helps you reflect about who you are, right? As leaders, as a father. And I think what's important is that reflection is so important, because the question I would ask then, and I want to go to my next question, which I think is going to open us up a little bit more. When we think about those discussions that we've had with either our children or our family, to ask us, how do we show up, right? How do we show up in these spaces to make sure that we are doing exactly what we need to do, whether it's from your manhood, whether it's from your education? How do we really make sure that we stand in those things and be able to make those decisions? Because sometimes those decisions can be hard, right? When we are trying to figure out how do we best show up, right? Which is going to take me back to, and I'm gonna go back to you, Brother Ajamu. How do we teach vulnerability that some of us were never taught to our young men? How do we teach vulnerability? Because it's tough right now, man. I keep thinking about all the things that are going on right now that, I'll start there. Just let me know your thoughts.
You know what, big brother? So as a social emotional development expert, especially in dealing with children of color, particularly young boys of color, I deal with some of the most hardcore street cats, you know what I'm saying, in these schools and, just in the various systems in which I work in. And these dudes be so hard on the outside, but their interior is so shattered. The interior is all over the place. Their emotions are all over the place. They dealing with pain from their father not being there. So trauma that they dealt with as a child, they carried into their manhood because they never learned how to form healthy relationships with people, whether it was because of the relationship with mom or dad or significant others. They never figured out how to form those healthy bonds. And so now anybody who comes to give them love is seen as a foreign attack on them or something. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not chaotic, because it's not dramatic, because it's not traumatic. So my goal when I do my workshops with the youth, and again, particularly young boys of color, my goal is to get them to open up and use their words. I'm big on telling your own story. I'm big on not letting Shannon tell my story. Okay.
That's right.
And Shannon had a biography. He may have, you understand me what I'm saying, some news clips and some history about me, but can't nobody tell my story. Can't nobody tell Dr. Ortiz's or Brother Hernandez's story how they can. Because they say, until the lion learns how to tell his own story, the hunter will always win. The hunter will always win. And so we as lions, we have to learn how to begin to orate our lives and tell people what we feel, what we go through, what is acceptable, what makes us uncomfortable, what makes us happy, what makes us sad. I was in a workshop one time, man, and the topic was fatherhood, just the irony thereof. And man, this young brother, I mean, hardcore dude, goals in his mouth, nappy dreads, pants sagging and shit, tattoos all up in here and everywhere. He in there crying like a baby. And the brother who's facilitating the session, my good brother Muhib Dair, my mentor, Muhib says to him, or that was Quab and I, excuse me, Quab says to him, tell me what if I was your dad, what would you say to me right now? And the brother said, man, I'd probably punch him in his mouth. And Quab said, you're right. He probably deserved that and everything. But your words can be way more effective than your fists. And Quab got on his knees in front of this young brother. He said, talk to me and tell me what you would tell me if I was your dad. And I mean, the brother got to telling stories back from middle school when his dad caused trauma in their life. But because he never had that opportunity to express it, he only know how to fight. He don't even know how or want to talk his issues out. And so we see so much misdirected anger, frustration, and pain in our communities of young boys because they don't have that outlet and the equipment and the tools and resources to express their frustrations. So when you talk about that teacher vulnerability, I'm huge on that. I'm huge on that. And it look different for different people. That vulnerability may not be, what you talk to about your wife or your significant other may be different from what you discuss with your mother or your circle of brotherhoods or your therapist like me. I go to therapy. Okay. Yeah. As long as you are vulnerable, open, and raw, that's key to manhood to me. That's key.
Brother Ajamu, thank you. And thank you for evoking that you go to therapy. I do too. So thank you for saying that. And for, we need to make sure that, our men out here are readily available to go to therapy because it is very important for us. Dr. Ortiz, I want to bring you into this conversation once again. When we talk about how do we teach vulnerability that some of us were never taught, how are we teaching our young men about vulnerability?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm not an expert. I've raised sons. I got a 24-year-old son. I've had a lot of relatives. I experienced a cross section of human interactions, from people who were middle class to people who are gangbangers, come out of prison. I mean, across the entire spectrum. So I judge no man. I don't judge anybody. I mean, we're all human, right? We're all human. We need to understand our basic humanity. That's one of the things that I'm very clear about, right? Because even the guy who's, like one of my uncles who's doing time, he's human too. He loves his family. He loves whatever, right? I think that's part of the problem that we have today. I don't like to use the word vulnerability because I think as a man, we want to emphasize strength. It's not that we're being vulnerable, so we're being human. There's nothing wrong with expressing emotion. There's nothing wrong with loving. There's nothing wrong with having affection, because as a man, if you tell me you're going to teach me to be vulnerable, I'm going to shut down, because my father always taught me a man is about sacrifice, discipline, stoicism, strength. So if you're going to have come on, Ramon, I'm going to teach you to be vulnerable. Now, if I teach you to be a better man, if I'm going to teach you to express your humanity better, I can see that. And that involves crying. If your mother passes, it's okay to cry. I mean, if you're familiar with history, right? And I go back to an archetype of Mexican history, Pancho Villa. If you heard about Pancho Villa, he was one of the prominent people in the Mexican Revolution, the third largest revolution in human history. 1/10 of the population was lost. Much of the situation that Mexico's in right now is because of the destruction of that revolution. Anytime there's a revolution, things don't just get better right away, right? I mean, it was a situation that required people to rebel. So he was a wanted man. He couldn't go back to his choza, which is hut, where his mother was dying. So they placed a lantern in the window for every night she was alive, and they said they would put it out when his mother died. This man wept on top of a mountain when his mother passed, like a baby, right? Does that mean this guy was not strong or a warrior? No, his mother died. It's okay to express emotion. And I think that's what we have to, hence the balanced masculinity, right? My father was, again, you got to have a role model for masculinity, and you have to see it, and it's seen in different contexts. The brother that was talking earlier, he does it within his own cultural context, and that's a good thing, right? Because if it's coming from me, you may not connect. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if it's coming from him, if you see yourself in that man, if you see those cultural expressions of masculinity, those universal attributes of masculinity reflected by a man that looks like you're more likely to emulate that, right? And I think that I mean, I think that's important. And then, you know, I seen a question that came up, and I'm going to address it. It says, why don't you use the word toxic masculinity? Because I don't like, I see it, and I forgive this expression. Masculinity, I think, is a good thing. Toxic masculinity, I feel like you're neutering men before you even have the conversation, right? I'm not going to take somebody who's a man of color who, you know, is under the gun in society, you know, because we're seen as a threat, and start by talking about your toxic masculinity. I'm going to talk to you about your masculinity, then I'm going to talk to you about the bad behavior that needs to stop because it's self-destructive, right? But I'm not going to start by neutering you. You know, that's what history has always tried to, you know, do to men. We are in our community. If you look at how police developed, right? In the South, it was the patty rollers who became the police for South. If you look at Southwest, whether it was the Texas Rangers or the California Rangers, they evolved to suppress the Mexican population. They branded us as bandits, right? Those that resisted occupation. And you had a police force that was developed to suppress the Mexican population in the Southwest. So we, as men of color, are always seen as a threat. That's why, you know, my sisters, I have older sisters when I was younger, they could go to a party and everything's fine because they're attractive and people will let you in. They're not threatened by you. I go to a party, I end up in a fight because somebody feels threatened by me, and, you know, they mess with you, right? So masculinity brings with it, you know, certain privileges, but also certain drawbacks. Hence, men need to, you know, the training of manhood starts from when it's young. And I commend the brother there for what he's doing, because it's necessary, right? You don't just become a man, you're trained and you're formed as a man, you know, through the challenges in life and the feedback and interaction you have with other men that forge. Manhood is forged like steel, right? It's heated up and it's forged, it's hammered. The people in your life are hammering that. What's left is a tempered, hard tool that it can be used for good or it can be used for bad. And that is manhood in its essence.
Brother Michael, come in. I want to hear your words, and I got another question I got to come back to with Dr. Ortiz, but let us know your thoughts. What do you think?
I just want to add a little bit on what Dr. Ortiz just said. I think about when a person of color, a man of color, express passion, right? If you are having a conversation, let's just say we're having an equity conversation, and you speak passionately. Mm-hmm. That the toxic masculinity, or the way that people view that, is they look at that passion and they equate it to aggressiveness. And then one of my favorite books that I read, White Fragility, when you look at chapter 6, it talks about that fragility of people, typically white people, who become uncomfortable and then shut down whatever the conversation is, because all they feel they're so uncomfortable, they feel that they're being threatened when they're having those. When you get that passion, when you start talking about it, and so what it does is it tries to force people of color to be calm. People get uncomfortable when you're in a lunchroom and you're seeing kids just being happy and jovial and talking. They're too loud. What's going on? People start gravitating, looking over. You look at the mall, and you're talking to trying to suppress, right? And you disguise it by saying, well, it's disturbing everybody else. I often would talk to people when we were in schools and saying, you know, when my family would get together, the loudest place in the entire house was in the kitchen. You know, everybody's laughing and talking, but it was one of these. We're in a cafeteria. People should be laughing and talking and having them because they're enjoying themselves. By suppressing that, you're trying to shut down kids' voices. When we are talking and they look at a black or brown man or female, but at this point we're men in this room right now, shutting that down, it's really a code of trying to shut down our voice at all. People are much more comfortable when we're not talking that, because we're not pushing the norms or pushing what people want. That's just something that's been on my mind to add on to what Dr. Ortiz was saying.
Let me. So I'm gonna throw something out there, because I had a conversation with. I do conversations with Black men across the country. We've been meeting since the pandemic of last year. We have conversations weekly, every week, And last night, a conversation came up, and I couldn't wait to have this conversation with you all. And Brother Michael, you just invoked exactly what the conversation was. My question to you all is, when you talked about the cafeteria and people having conversations and laughing, where is Black boy joy right now? Where is the joy that you all have and that you can have safely? So when you think about the joy in your world, because we don't get a lot of spaces to have joy. So that's what I want you to hear me say. We don't get many spaces to just have joy. Tell me, where do you all, and this is definitely off script, where do you all find joy right now? Anybody can jump in.
And I'll be real quick, because low key, I'm over here really wishing I was in the audience, because these two brothers right here, Brother Ortiz and Brother Hernandez and Ortiz, they really are blowing my mind with this content. I'm loving it, fellas. But for me, my Black boy joy, I'm big into martial arts. Martial arts is a huge part of my development as a man, the discipline thereof, the focus thereof, the control over your body, the being able to de-escalate situations, even when I'm in situations where I know I need to bust somebody in their mouth, hit them with a roundhouse kick, pop the elbow. I step that from it, because it's different levels of warriorhood. So for me, that's where my Black boy joy comes in. And what I do know is that the Black boys up today are stripped of their joy, because we are taught that to smile, to laugh, to be jovial is a sign of weakness. We got to be hard and we got to be thugs all day. We got to, you know what I'm saying? We got to watch out for the man all day. We got to just be on alert all day. And so joy is stripped. And when joy is stripped from you, then your peace of mind is stripped from you. Your emotion is stripped. You are desensitized to the world around you. So I'm big on getting young men of color into boxing, martial arts, grappling and wrestling, these type of things, not for the fighting aspect. For that, yes, because the world is going to try to fight us and we got to protect ourselves and our family. But the mental clarity I get from training is a whole nother piece of joy for me.
Man, that's great. Who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in just real quick. This isn't going to be a popular statement, but the last 13 months have brought me tremendous joy. This lockdown, this quarantine, it slowed the world down. I can't tell you with 3 teenagers how often before the pandemic hit, when we would all be at the same dinner table, or on a Friday night, we're watching family movie, we're doing stuff. But the last 13 months, man, we'd have board games and we would talk. It made life much more simple. What brought me joy is being able to close. What brings me joy is behind closed doors, where I don't have to have a persona. I don't have to be somebody else. And no one needs or wants anything from me, is that I can just be myself. Whether it is having a beer or shooting a game of pool, but I am Mike Hernandez as opposed to Mr. Hernandez. And those are two very different lives, right? But that brings me joy, is when I can surround myself with people that want nothing from me, that just want to be with me.
Dr. Ortiz.
First of all, I want to comment, about the martial arts thing. I was going to say combat sports, definitely. I think you talk about discipline and sacrifice. I think that's a very important thing for men of color, because like I said, it helps accentuate your masculine identity. I come from a family of boxers. My father boxed, amateur boxers, obviously. All my brothers, myself, my son. So there's that, it enforces that sense of discipline, and it gives you a sense of confidence. I mean, not that you go and start a fight, but you also know, if you got to have at it, you're going to protect what's yours, but you have the judgment to not put yourself in situations that are going to become self-destructive. So I'm with you on that. I think that's great. I think we've done away with a lot of those things. And I think it's important for that in our community. But if I was going to say, where do I find my joy? I mean, I'm going to quote Shakespeare, right? All the world's a stage, all the men and women merely players. They have their entrances and their exits, and one man in his time plays many parts. I'm happiest when I'm playing the roles that are central to my masculine identity. Being a husband, being a father, being a son, being a brother, being an uncle, moving through those different spaces and contributing value to my family. That's where I'm happiest, right? So yeah, that's I think that's what gives me joy. Everything else is just a byproduct of that central, ethos that you get from your family.
Jump in, brother. Jump in.
So, and I think for me, it just, I'm a young cat. Like I said, I'm 29. I had my son when I was 20 years old, sleeping on my mama's couch, trying to be a revolutionary on one hand and a D-boy on the other hand. And then fatherhood was just thrust in my life. So it was an interesting time for me. But what Brother Ortiz just said was so powerful to me, because I find a lot of joy in my solitude away from my family. Because even in my family, I've just grown to be, the healer of the family, if you will, the certain glue to my tribe, if you will. And I find so much peace. And I think it takes a certain level of maturity to find peace with the tribe. Because a lot of time I just be wanting to escape. I just be wanting to run away from my things and just do me for a little while. And then I can put my cape on. Then I can put my daddy hat back on and my son hat back on. So, again, I honor those type of things. And as a young man, I aspire to elevate through manhood so that my tribe, my household will become my central peace hub, if you will.
Yeah. So I want you to stay right there, but don't go anywhere. My question is when we talked about, you said something specifically about peace. And I think it's important for us to try our best to figure out how do we also bring that in every area of our life, whether you make a lot of money or whether you make a little bit of money. Where do we find that peace at? And I guess my question is, what are the healthy aspects in our lives right now that we can drive more ways of bringing more peace, not only for Black and brown boys, but also for our families? Give me a little bit about what you think about how can we drive more of the peace aspect in lives right now.
I mean, for me, I'm big on brotherhood. I said that when I first stepped in. For me, a thing that brings me peace when I'm going through turmoil is being able to call one of my two best friends, Rob and Rob. I got two best friends. These is my brothers. I don't have any biological brothers, but these ones are my brothers. I call them and say, man, I'm struggling with my son, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm going through this with my lady friends, or whatever the case may be. And just to have that support system from a Black man who got my best interest at heart, so they're not going to play in my face. And when I want to jump off a bridge, tell me that's a good idea. They're going to say, no, you need to sit down. Like Mr. Hernandez said, go have a beer somewhere, you know what I'm saying, do a reflection and get your head back in the game. And so for me, that's where I find, a whole lot of value at is having a support system outside of myself, because we think we know it all. But the word says to lean not on thy own understanding. That's the quickest way to describe it, is to think you know it all. And so myself being able to reach out to, and both of my best friends are older than me. So again, I'm constantly putting myself in situations, the men who are older than me in my lives, I reach out to them. When I have chaos and turmoil, I say, hey, I need some peace, some reflection, some advice, and some ministry. Can you help me out? I ain't never been afraid to ask for help at all.
Well, and I think what's important about that is that there are a lot of men who are. They try their best to do it all on their own. And I think, one of my many statements, I say that more hands make the lift lighter. And in order for us to really do more, we have to ask for help. We have to ask the question of, can you help me? Can you support me in this? And I think that's really, really big. Dr. Ortiz, you want to jump in on this as well?
Yeah, I think you find peace as a community and as a country. I mean, we were so divided now. There's so many layers to that. Obviously race, economics, politics, there's demographic changes that are coming. There's geopolitical forces out there. U.S. is no longer the sole superpower. All those things are having reverberations on this empire that's retrenching and tends to focus inward. But I think you get peace by understanding that, you have to focus on the humanity of your neighbor. And your neighbor may be different people at different times, right? If we're having this conversation, you guys are my neighbors, right? You're my community at this moment. And we need to be able to find our basic humanity. For instance, whether you're talking police brutality, whether you're talking child poverty, whether you are talking economic development. I mean, human beings are more valuable than anything. And I'm not a climate change denier, but I'll give you this. People are even more important than a tree, right? So it's, we need to protect the environment, but it amazes me that there will be a movement to protect, some sort of environmental thing, and you'll have people going hungry down the street. I mean, our humanity has to be central to what we do. And part of it is a change in consciousness and ethos, and I think the consumer mentality that we've sort of been inundated with over the past 50 years is going to have to change, right? It was able to exist because all the other industrial superpowers after World War II were destroyed. Now we have competition. I think we have to find other things that give us a sense of humanity other than making a whole lot of money. I'm not saying it's bad. Make your money, right? But, do not lose your humanity in the process, right? Whether that, whether your neighbor's black, brown, Asian, whatever, there's commonality there. And you've got to be willing to have compassion and be willing to contribute, to help each other, right? Because you didn't get where you were at by yourself. Nobody looks at it. So that's what I say. It's like, be very conscious of not allowing anybody to be dehumanized in your presence or in any conversation. That's not acceptable.
Brother Michael.
Yeah, there's not much more to add on to what these two gentlemen have said, but what brings me peace, I have my friends and I have my family, but I also am very cognizant of the position that I have, or positional authority that I have. What brings me peace is being able to use that to help children or help families in need, right? Being able to sit down and have some influence to be able to break down some barriers, the systematic barriers that our society, that we have created. And now you have the ability to be able to navigate and help families. I'm working in schools and working in this position. Holy cow, man. I mean, being able to sit down and being able to navigate the school system, the judicial system, being able to pick up the phone and call somebody like, Judge Mitchell, and just saying, I know you can't give me legal advice, but as a father, how would you handle this if this was happening? Those things there, when you walk and you leave, those are tangible successes. Those are tangible things that you walked away with. Some days, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just me. I'm not sure if I accomplished anything on certain days when I walk out of the office. But on those days, man, I sleep well. I'm very, very happy and excited that we've been able to help. Cash over compassion. The cash doesn't hurt because you're able then to help. If the greedy component of the cash is where the problems are. If you're able to sit down and support and give back into your community, I'm a very simple man. I got blue jeans on. I threw a jacket on for y'all. I got jeans on and a pair of Vans, tennis shoes. I'm simple. But what if there's anything I have that somebody needs, and I'm perfectly good with that, because that's the way that I was raised by my family. Is as long as I provide for me and my family the access stuff, and that brings me peace. That brings me joy. And joy is extremely hard to find sometimes. That's the key.
I appreciate you all giving me those nuggets, which is so important. I want to go back to something because I think it's very important, and I want to invoke for us to think about. I really wanted to get back to this therapy part, because I think it's really important for us to have a conversation on how we're really going to get help for our community. And so, one of the things I want to make sure that I want you all to leave some solutions, right? For folks who are listening, I want you to leave solutions, but I want you to talk to the people and really give some advice. So I'm going to give you a question, and then I'm going to invoke what I need to. So what is one healthy practice that you all would like to share with our folks that are listening? I'll start with you, Dr. Ortiz.
One healthy practice, and again, I don't want to make this about religion or put religion on anyone or spirituality. You've got to have, I think, a spiritual dimension. I mean, I believe that, there's 2 days in eternity that are marked that can never change. The day I was born, the day I will die. I didn't choose or can choose any one of them. That's sort of the way things work. What I do in between, that's free will. And I think reflecting on your mortality and reflecting on the contributions of what you'll give this world is very important. It provides you peace. And some people get it from men's groups, some people get it from therapists, but definitely talk and reach out to people, reflect on who you are as a person, reflect on your interaction with others, and reflect on the contributions that you would like to make before you leave.
That's good. That's good. I'll go to Brother Michael.
Can you tell me the question? I want to make sure that just a healthy practice, is that what you're asking?
Yep. Just what is a healthy practice that you would like to share?
Well, I would like to say it's like reading or it's, just meditating and such, but it's not. Healthy practice to me is I love to lift weights. And the physical exertion of throwing weight around, it's a stress reliever for me. I sit and I talked earlier about having passion, and some people mistake that as aggression. I was raised as being, you're a man, you don't show emotion, you protect. I grew up as a wrestler. I'm the protector of your little sister. I throw weight around so I don't become aggressive. That's the way that I'm able to get that out, thinking about, and I start my mornings on it. And you definitely can tell when I'm putting plates on if I've had a hard day or not, because that's just the way I get it. So when I come home, I'm feeling much better. My heart, my blood pressure's down, and I'm able then to relax. But just throwing in my headphones and doing that, not talking to anybody, and just focusing on this. That's something that brings me peace. That's something that it's a healthy way for me to get out some of my emotions or stress, any of those. I do like to read, but I like that.
Okay. Sounds good. Brother Ajamu, healthy practice. Share with us.
Yep, and I'll be very brief with mine. I go see a therapist twice a month, every 2 weeks, and I wish I could chop it up with her every day. You hear me? I was very particular in getting a woman of color. I have a Black woman therapist, and the way that she deals with me is so appreciated. She supports me where I need that, and she corrects me where I need that. So that's one thing I'm always big on advocating: therapy, mental health conversation. As I alluded to earlier, martial arts, and I'm going to say another facet thereof is yoga. I'm into yoga as well. And those two things, you have to be intentionally present in the moment. What brings chaos to my life is just having so many different hats, always being called here, there, my students, they parents, my family, the community life, relationship life, so on and so forth. And so when I'm doing yoga and martial arts, none of that can matter. None of that can matter. I have to let that go, surrender myself to my body and my practice at that moment, and be very intentional and present. So that's just kind of my reset, man. I get down on that yoga or that martial art mat, and I mean, I could be on it for 10 minutes. I could be on it for 10 days nonstop. But when I'm done with my practice, I'm always a better person. I'm always a little bit more just centered, a little bit more, focused. And then lastly, I too am a very spiritual man. So I believe that you have to have something bigger than yourself as a focus in your life. I can't be the biggest thing in my life. I cannot. Me, and with all of my humanly flaws, I better believe in something a little bit bigger than I. So those three things: therapy, martial arts, and yoga, and then my spiritual foundation.
I mean, I think those are great things. I want to make sure, as you all were speaking, and I think what I'll do is I do a last round robin, just if you all have any last words. But I wrote down things as you all were speaking. And, for our community who is listening, these are conversations that Black and brown men like to have on a daily. It is important for us to have conversations with each other. And one of the things that I am taking from this conversation, which is so important, is that we have to make sure that we're in touch with who we are. One of the things that I always, I haven't gotten a chance to get on a plane yet, but I'm so excited that at some point, when the world opens up a little bit more, I'll be able to get on a plane. But the one thing that when you get on a plane, there's a something that comes over the announcement, and the announcement says that if we go through some turbulence, the mask will come down, and when the mask come down, you have to start to breathe yourself. And so what I say to you all is that you have to start with self in order for us to really magnify what can happen. We talked about family. We talked about providing. We talked about peace. We talked about protection. But one of the things we have to do is make sure that we start with self in order for those things to become what they will be. And so as I end here, it's so important for us that I make sure that we also affirm each other, that every person who is listening, you are more than enough. We need to make sure that we support each other in every effort that we can, because it is important. And so in my last words, I will do a quick round robin. Dr. Ortiz, what will be your last words for our community?
Focus on love, sacrifice, and discipline.
Brother Michael.
Last words is post-traumatic stress, the PTSD is a real thing. Find your people, your trusted people, and use your words. Talk. Let it out. Earlier, I will say I was emotional before this, and I appreciated the support. You have to find out healthy ways to release that. Otherwise, you bottle it in, and then it explodes. So find your tribe and love and hug that tribe.
Love and hug them. Brother Ajamu.
Accountability for yourself and accountability for those around you. If my brother out here poisoning the community and I have not done anything to correct him or step away from him, then I am just as guilty as him. I stand on that. And then just levels of manhood. Always find a man who you admire and look to them and reach out to them and say, hey, man, I love how you did this. Can you give me some game? Maybe I can take you out to dinner or lunch or coffee, or let's go on a jog. Let's go lift weights. Let's pray together. Find you a mentor in the game. Whatever industry you're trying to get in, find a mentor who is passionate and successful, and connect yourself to good ground. Yeah.
Well, brothers, I thank you all so much. As you all can see in my background, we have my poster, which is Good Trouble. And all of you today are getting into good trouble. So thank you all. Appreciate you all. Affirm you all. And let's keep loving and protecting our community. Let's keep helping young folks as we see, and make sure we protect our peace. And whatever it is, pass it on, as Brother Ajamu said, to someone else, because there's always someone watching. So thank you all, and you all have a great day.
This is 365 Media.